Three, two. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of The Complete Game. I'm your host, Kurt Schilling, and with me tonight is my namesake, Garrick Schilling. Hello, Garrick.
What's going on, everybody?
This is Friday, April 18th. Gonna wish you all a happy Easter early. Quickly round up Friday's games, and then we'll get into a couple different topics. Right now, ongoing, Milwaukee up 3-1 on Oakland. Houston up 5-4 on San Diego. The Dodgers are up 2-0. They got the base load in the ninth.
Three
And
nothing.
huh?
3-0.
3-0 now. Uh, Big news, good news from that one. Yamamoto went 7 scoreless, punched out 10. Uh, Good news, if you can call it that, which I think it is for Texas. A healthy Jacob DeGrom went 7 innings, punched out 7, threw really well tonight. And Anaheim, the LA Angels are up 2-0 on the Giants in the third. Games from today: Atlanta beat Minnesota 6-4. The Mets beat the Cardinals 5-4 on Francisco Lindor's walk-off home run, which just so happened to be his 250th career home run. His Hall of Fame trajectory continues to ascend. A very special player on a very good team this year. Red Sox beat the White Sox 10-3. Toronto beat Seattle 3-1. The Yankees shut out Tampa 1-0. Carlos Rodon, coming off a bad outing, went 6 on 2 hits, punched out 9. Paul Goldschmidt continues his torrid start. He was 3 for 4. He's hitting 373 today. Since he beat Baltimore 8-3, Abbott goes 6 on 2 hits, punches out 11 on one earned run. Terry Francona working his magic again in a different place. Abbott goes to 2-0 with a 1.64 on the year. Tigers beat the Royals 7-3. I want to jump back quickly, and for those of you that are into it, you might have seen it, but for not those of you who haven't, you can hunt. We'll put a link to the video from Wednesday's game in Pittsburgh. The Nats and the Pirates were playing, and you're going to see Jorge Lopez throw a ball up and in, well, up and over Andrew McCutchen. And I'm going to tell you that that wasn't an accident. I don't know that he was throwing at him. He was. This is what happens when young pitchers who aren't taught how to pitch in the minor leagues try to throw it in the big leagues. You can't miss there. Well, you can. And what's going to happen is what happened. I don't know the specifics around the ensuing conversations, but somehow Lopez got ejected after this. McCutchen goes to first, and O'Neill Cruz comes up to the plate and on a 1-1 pitch makes a 1-1 game, 5-1, hitting a grand slam. Uh, Very bounce backy of the Pirates, and a team that's in a tough situation with injuries to some of their starters. Come win a big game, a good game, and that's an emotional game. That a lot of guys in the clubhouse afterwards are feeling saucy. But it's not carrying over because they got pounded 10-7 today by Cleveland. Naylor went 3 for 5, hit his second home run, drove in 3. And then Philly beat Miami 7-2. I want to take a second to talk about the game. You had the dream pitchers matchup for guys, for people that bought tickets to this game. You're going in hoping to see a matchup. Only one guy showed up. Sandy Alcantara coming back from Tommy John. There's going to be ups and downs. He gave up 6 over 2 innings. He's 2-1 with a 7.2 ERA now. But on the other side, and I said this a couple years ago, when the New York Mets let Zack Wheeler go, I thought it was the biggest mistake and the biggest signing of that winter. He's gone to Philadelphia and been everything they paid for and more. He punched out 13 over 7 today, gave up 5 hits, 2 runs. He's 2-1, and he's proving to be, well, everybody talks about top tier aces, and I don't know that there's anything flashy about him. Like, it's not the 102 of Skeens or
That's
the,
kind of what I was going to ask after you. Is he, because you see a lot of guys now overpowering guys,
right,
and that's their
right. And he
mainstay,
does
their put
that.
away pitch. He has that, but he seems more of like a five tool guy. Like
Well,
he's got a little bit of
and I
everything.
use the analogy very, very loosely, but when people ask me about a guy in the game today that I would compare myself to, I hesitate to say him because I think he's got far better stuff than I ever had. But his 13 punch outs are not because he was throwing the ball 98. His 13 punch outs came because he's a power arm that pitches. So that had to be a fun game to watch, at least early when Alcantara was in, because you had two guys that are top of the charts from a domination perspective. But you got to have two guys show up for a pitching duel. But I think Zack Wheeler, this might be his year. He's been, belle of the ball. He hasn't been the belle of the ball yet. He's been the runner-up and the bridesmaid a couple times. A lot of stiff competition in the National League, but if you get a chance to see the highlights of his outing today, it's for you young pitchers out there, have a look and understand that guys like Zack Wheeler make 95 to 98 look 105 to 108, not because they throw harder, but because they're breaking stuff in their command. And when he's on, tough. You can't beat him. And you got to outpitch him, and that's not easy to do. Finally, we're going to end up in Chicago. What a game. So the Cubs won 13-11, but that doesn't tell half the story. And we're actually going to talk about a couple different things. The Diamondbacks scored 10 runs in the eighth inning. 10 runs, which is can be a club demoralizing, game destructive result. The Cubs answer back with 6 in the bottom of the eighth and end up winning 13-11. Which leads me to a conversation that I want to talk about ballpark dimensions and Wrigley Field. So baseball, hockey has some different size rinks, but the pros play on the pro rink, right?
NHL,
field,
NFL, and NBA all
yep.
play on the same exact measurements.
In one stadium, you might in baseball. For those of you, I'm sure most of you already all know this. Every park is different and can be different. You've got parks like Fenway that's 300 feet. Some say 299 down the right field line. And you've got other parks that have a 340-foot line, 440 to center. And parks have gotten smaller as ownership has wanted offense to go up. The new stadiums, Pirate Stadium, Wrigley Field, the new stadiums, San Francisco, they all feature some quirk, right? You've got the Crawford boxes in Houston with the center field that has Tal's Hill, which is, I still think, one of the dumbest things in baseball. But they play differently. And as a pitcher, you have to have fastball command and you have to pitch differently in different parks. Wrigley Field has always been an exception to every rule, and here's why. First of all, when you stand on the mound at Wrigley Field, I swear, honest to God, it feels like the ivy on the wall is literally like touching you on the back shoulder. It feels so small. There's no room behind home plate. And that was always a big thing from a pitcher's perspective. I always had comfort or, discomfort. I don't know based on the scene. In Montreal, in the old Olympic Stadium, they used to have a restaurant behind home plate with thick plate glass. It was right on home plate. I loved pitching there. It felt comfortable. I don't know why. Dodger Stadium, home plate was 2 to 3.5 miles from the backstop, it felt like. And so a wild pitch was a two-base event, and I hated that feeling. But it was a great park to pitch in because it was big.
When you're playing in Little League and to the level that I played at, you're used to those little switches and dimensions playing baseball. But the one thing I wanted you to talk about specifically about Wrigley and playing in places like Chicago or places where there will be inclement weather is when you're playing at 60 to 75 miles an hour, which is most of my career, it's not a big deal. But when you're playing at the top level, how big of a difference in a game that's 13-11
right.
is the wind factor?
If you want to go back in time, there's video of it. The Cubs played a game. I believe it was with the Cardinals or Giants, and it was a 23-22 finish. I think Schmitty hit 3 or 4 home runs, came in a bunch of home runs, and the wind was howling out.
I'll try and find this as
yes. So this is the truth too. I had a very rigid routine on the day I pitched, and I left for the ballpark at the same time. So I was always taking a cab to the field. When I went to Chicago, after I learned about Wrigley and the wind, I would drive a certain way into the ballpark so I could see the flagpole before I got to the ballpark on the days I was pitching, because I'm a fly ball pitcher. So the weather changing isn't going to turn me into a ground ball pitcher. I didn't have a two-seamer. But as a pitcher with fastball command, I always pitched to different parts of the ballpark. When I pitched in Boston, I pitched to right center because that's where I could keep right-handers in the ballpark. So I pitched away from righties, pitched into lefties, keep that ball into the deep part of the parks, keep the monster out of play, keep the pesky pole out of play. Pitched in Houston, that was everything was a long way. But you look at Arizona, and like I said, Houston, those ballparks, there's places you pitch to. In Wrigley Field, it's the same. So I would tell you this. On days the wind's blowing in, Wrigley Field played bigger than the old Astrodome. It didn't matter how hard you hit the ball. If you didn't hit the ball down the line, it was almost impossible to hit a home run. So on those days, I was like in heaven because your margin for error got bigger and balls didn't go anywhere. Because again, Wrigley Field was set up for ground ball pitchers because the grass in Wrigley Field is monstrously thick and high. Again, didn't help me. So on days when the wind was blowing in, I could make and adapt and do whatever I wanted to do within reason. On days it was blowing out, I had to, felt like I had to be perfect because I needed fly balls to be from right center to left center because it plays almost like an honest park in the center, but down to right and left, not so. I mean, right's still deeper than left, but it still played minuscule. It felt like a wiffle ball game. It really did. And so, all these other factors that come into play when Wrigley Field was blowing out. Who's my umpire today? Is it a big guy with a big zone, small zone? Who are their starters today? Are they playing some bench guys that are anxious, going to be swinging? All those things factored in. And once the game started, you didn't think about those things because the other guy has to do it too. The other guy has to pitch with the same factors, the same wind, all the other things that go that I have to do. And that's why you can't complain about it, but you had to adapt to it. Wrigley Field forced you to adapt much more than any other ballpark. And there were kind of three levels of wind. There was the light breeze, which was the park played kind of fair. There was the heavier breeze, which made the park play a little smaller, and then there was the gale, which coming off the lake there, you could have it. Um, you could give up. It was one of the few parks where I felt like I might have given up some cheap home runs. I usually when I gave them up, they usually went to a souvenir stand somewhere outside the ballpark. And that ballpark, I think there's a couple different times where you would hit fly. It's almost like every fly ball at the head towards the monster in Fenway. Okay, I got him, but did I get him? Because that jam shot that lands in the front row of the monster seats is still
Peeking over your shoulder a
it's
little more.
pop up in and so you become aware of that. And I think much like Colorado, I think the ballpark has a significant impact on young pitching. When you come to the big leagues and you're playing, and that's my argument, and this is to kind of get off topic, but stay on topic. If I owned a Major League Baseball team, every single minor league ballpark would be built exactly like my big league ballpark.
Do you know that the Red Sox have a green monster in
Yeah,
every
no,
minor league
that's
affiliate?
exactly.
Yeah.
I want to judge my players based on the dimensions of the park they're going to be playing in.
I've always wondered why that wasn't more consistent.
Well,
And I think
it
it's
isn't
because they change hands
because
as
yes, because
well.
minor league teams change ownership.
Yeah.
But the clubs that understand this, they understand that's a monumentally important thing. Just like there are certain ballpark, Colorado Springs, for instance, it's the AAA it has been for a long time for the Rockies. Totally appropriate because that thin air in Colorado Springs is that thin air you get in Denver, and so you're going to see truth in the numbers. There's a lot of clubs in the high desert in California, in Texas, where they're just ridiculous offensive leagues because of the way the ballparks are set up and the conditions. The Florida State League down in Florida has forever been known as a pitcher's league because the air is heavier, the ball doesn't travel as well all across that league, and the ballparks are all the spring training parks, so they're big.
Yeah.
So you kind of you can't get a true feel. But now and this is where I'll make an argument for the sabermetrics guys, the exit velocity and bat speed, that's park neutral. Doesn't matter what park you're playing in. Those things don't change.
They translate.
Right. They do translate. So you can tell when a guy's got exit velocity in the minor leagues, that's not going to suddenly change. It's going to get better as he gets older. But, that was all to say that Wrigley Field is its own monster and so unique and so different. And, I still feel the same way in Wrigley as I do in Fenway. God bless them for keeping the stadiums. They belong to still be here.
Yeah.
They shouldn't ever be replaced. I know, with ballparks getting a little bit smaller from a capacity standpoint, it's a benefit because they want to sell out, right? You can sell out 81 games at 39,000 people. It's hard to sell out 81 games at 66,000 people. So I get it. But and let me just mention along with that Cubs thing, I do believe that managers in baseball are and I'm going to make it very black and white, but it isn't. There are the managers who have a significant impact on their team's day-to-day performance, and not because they bunt and hit and run and all this other stuff, but because of their approach, how they are, and teams tend to, you're going to see it in Cincinnati, you're going to see it in Chicago with Counsell. This is a Craig Counsell team. That 6 runs they answered with in the bottom of the eighth is who he is. One of I think one of the more underrated players I ever played with. If you remember in 2002, Matt Williams got hurt and Craig played third base. I thought Craig was his defensive metrics were off the charts. He had as good a defensive third base season as anybody not named Scott Rowland I ever pitched in front of. But that's who he is. He is a guy who grinded out every at bat. You're going to see his team do the same things because you give up 10 runs in the eighth inning, nobody's coming to the bench like, oh, let's go get him.
It's also if you look at the box score right before that, they're up 7. They scored 5 runs in the bottom of that 7th inning right before. They're up 7-1. It's a very easy game to check out of.
Game open in the bottom
It's
of
a
7th.
very easy game to check out of, especially if
Right.
there's 150 more down the line and the other team puts a 10 spot on you in the next inning. That's the managerial day-to-day difference you're talking about, where most of those teams, if that guy doesn't give a shit, they'll roll over in that bottom half and call it a day. They score 6 and end up winning the game 13-11.
Right. And that goes back to I always called it the answer inning as the starting pitcher. The biggest half innings of a game were always when we scored in the bottom half or top half. At the shutdown inning, because that changes everything. You just scored, put us up 3-0. I walk a guy, error, broken bat single, 3-run homer.
It's one of the hardest things for non-baseball people to get is momentum in baseball.
Yeah.
For such a slow game, that is how you carry momentum.
Yeah. And I always looked at it as when we scored 3 and I go out and punch out 2 guys and it's 3 up, 3 down.
Boom.
I have
Right
the
back
game
in,
now.
bats in their
I have
hands.
the game in my
That
hand.
feels good for the entire dugout.
That, when you talk about an ace, that's what an ace is. An ace does, and an ace understands that shutdown inning. And you might have 3 a game, right? You score 1 in the first, boom, 3 up, 3 down the bottom of the first. Okay, we got the momentum, we got the initiative. Now, if you haven't gotten me early, I felt like you're not getting me. But same thing. You break it open with 3 in the 7th, and it's 4-0 now. You come back, give them 2 in the 8th. Well, the game isn't right.
If you're Dodgers starting pitcher tonight, Yamamoto, if you're get that Tommy Edman leadoff homer, the only thing that feels better than that is getting those 3 outs in the bottom half and just starting from there. Like, that's all you need.
Well,
if you're a
here's the
guy
thing
like that,
a lot of young pitchers in the big leagues don't understand. When you go up against a DeGrom, when you go up against the Yamamoto now, when you go up against the Skeens, it becomes, and that's how I judge young pitchers on how they do against aces. Because that's almost, you work yourself up. When you're young, I'm competing against Maddox.
yeah.
Right? Maddox is not thinking about shelling. He's thinking about getting hitters out, which you do later in the career. But that always amped me up. So I always look at that. If you want to look at a young pitcher on your team and get a feel for how he may be in October, watch those games. Because you understand something that you don't understand until October, which is the leadoff hitter is the winning run. Now, that's the same all year long. But in October, it really is.
You feel it.
Right? Game 1 of the 2001 World Series, the Yankees bleed out a run. We come back, Counsell hits a home run in the bottom of the first to tie at 1-1. In my mind, okay, they're not scoring again.
Clean slate.
Right.
Yeah.
Total momentum change.
Yeah.
And in baseball, a slow-moving sport,
that is the beauty of it, too.
Yep. And I wanted to get back to the McCutchen thing with Lopez throwing at him. I had in 1999, I believe, I went to the All-Star game in Colorado, and
98. 99's Fenway.
98, yes, 98. And the Sporting News asked me to interview Bob Gibson. So I was kind of the reporter.
Not a big deal.
No. And for those of you that don't know me, baseball history is one of my biggest life's passions. And I knew Mr. Gibson front to back, every statistic and all the stories with Johnny Podres telling me about him and all the things that go with that. So I was clearly up for it and honored. I had a chance to sit down with him and I talked to him, and it was one of the highlights of my life. And it's a Sporting News edition that I saw a copy of and just smiled, reliving it. But during the conversation, Bob Gibson, everybody talks about, he'd drill his mother in the family game kind of thing, right? And I asked him about throwing. He said, most of the time, I was trying to pitch in. and the ball got away from me. And he was being honest. There's no reason for him to lie at this point. You know, if he wanted to be a badass, say, yeah, I hit everybody. He said, and truth be told, the one guy who I never wanted to hit, or I might have hit as much as anybody, was Frank Robinson. And I was like, well, why didn't you want to throw? He said, it wasn't about throwing in him. When I hit him, every single time I hit him, he hit a home run off me in either the next at bat or later in that same game, every time. And I kind of laughed about that and thought, I had 52 guys in my career. I would tell you that 45 weren't accidental. And that's not, I wasn't throwing at guys I was doing things, either responding to a teammate getting drilled, responding to something, and
The
I
unwritten
never,
rules of the game,
yeah, and I
which
never
which
hit.
we should cover that
I
sometime.
know, yeah, and that's
Stuff
actually a
that
great
stuff that
topic. Right,
warranted
right,
retaliation
right,
because this bench clearing brawl we're talking about, I mean, that's not what the bench clearing
right,
brawls of 30
right,
years ago
right.
looked like, and it
And
also wasn't for an errant pitch,
right,
which if it was even remotely debatable, nothing would have happened.
right,
But you knew when guys were trying to throw at you
right.
back in the day.
If a ball, let me just tell you this: if a ball goes behind a batter, that pitcher was trying to drill the hitter.
Yeah.
If a ball goes above a hitter's head to the backside, that pitcher was either trying to knock him down or drill him. And it's also a byproduct of something we've talked about before in a couple of episodes. These kids don't have enough innings. They don't understand. They come to the big leagues having no clue. I'll never forget. I We had a game early in my career in 1992, and we had a young pitcher who couldn't pitch inside. He kept hitting people. And Darren Dalton was our catcher. And Dutch said he called a meeting after the game. And he rarely did that. But when he spoke, everybody listened. And he basically said, listen, guys, the next time I get hit because one of you MFers can't pitch inside, I'm not going to charge them out. I'm going to kick your ass. And I was like, okay. But you learn how to pitch inside, and there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. First of all, to be very clear, when I'm throwing in, there's only one spot to hit a guy. It's right here, right in the ribs, under the armpit.
Where
You
they
can't
make
get out of the way.
where they make the
Well, you can't get out of the way. It hurts worse than anything, and it always leaves a mark, right? So anyway, that was the Bob Gibson conversation. And like I said, I don't ever remember. I mean, I hit guys accidentally, but most of the guys I hit, we had again, 1997, the Marlin World Series year. We're playing the Marlins. Antonio Alfonseca drilled Scott Rowland after Scott Rowland hit a home run. So we're winning. We're winning by a good margin. I go out into the eighth inning, and Jim Leland is managing. Charles Johnson, their catcher, their all-star catcher, is leading out the inning. They're down 4 or 5 runs, and up steps John Wayner, the 25th guy on the roster. Jim Leland knew that I was going to drill the leadoff hitter. He didn't want his catcher to get hurt, so he sent John Wayner up and John knew he was getting hit.
arrow fodder.
Right. I missed with the first pitch and drilled him in the second pitch. He just put his bat down and walked down to first base. Everybody knew. I got ejected, but everybody knew. And like I said, that was how, for the most part, the game policed itself.
Unwritten rules. It's the same way that fighting
and,
works in
and
hockey.
I got to mention the Jorge Lopez thing. Really, him getting ejected came from a conversation after the event happened, which is another big problem in Major League Baseball. Umpires do not have a black and white set of rules, and it's not a black and white situation either. For them to go by on hit by pitches, there's no reason he should have thrown him out right there. You want to give teams warnings? That's fine. But you have to allow the game to play itself out. And I played in games, a lot of games when I was with the Red Sox. And then when I was in Philly in 93, every time we played the Cardinals, the game started with a warning. And in 04, same thing. We had multiple games because we cleared benches multiple games will start. Both your teams are warned before the game starts, which to young pitchers is a death knell because you're afraid to pitch in. If I hit somebody, I'm getting thrown out, which is, you can't do that in the big leagues. And then I wanted to take another step off the Philadelphia thing. And I mentioned last episode I was going to finish each episode talking about someone significant in my career, and talking about the Phillies and Zack Wheeler. Next to my dad and the Lord, probably there's a multi-way tie for me. But the guy that probably is at the front of the tie would be my pitching coach in Philadelphia when I arrived there, Johnny Podres. Um,
A name I've heard around my lifetime, like you hear about your uncle that wasn't your
right.
real uncle, someone that is borderline family the way they're talked
There's
about.
nothing that would have come after 92 that would have come without him. Nothing. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this story. I got traded the final day of spring training. I flew down to Miami to meet the team. It was a drizzly day, and Johnny said he wanted me to go out and throw a bullpen. And I had just been traded for Jason Grimsley. I'd had what ended up being probably the worst year of my career in Houston that year before, as a closer and a reliever. And I got traded, so my confidence was nowhere near where it should be. I threw a 20-minute bullpen, and I can tell you this. If I threw that bullpen at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, at 3:21, when I walked off that mound, my entire life changed. I walked off that mound believing that everything was going to happen for me. I could do anything. And it was 20 minutes of him. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, look at that. Oh my God, Jimmy, are you watching this? Oh my God. And no one had ever talked to me like that. And he wasn't a guy that needed. This is the MVP of the 1955 World Series. He shut out the Yankees in Game 7. He was part of the Koufax, Drysdale, Newcomb rotation. He's one of the most famous Brooklyn Dodgers in history. Uh, a thoroughly good human being, and the best. I had a lot of really good pitching coaches. Johnny was the best. John Farrell will close second, but Johnny turned my career around. I don't know any other way to put, and he did it in 20 minutes. And I think part of this talking about Johnny is to let you guys out there know, you coaches, your ability to impact a life is far more significant than you could ever imagine if you don't understand that already. Um, Again, there was nothing in my career that would have been what it was without him. I have so many good stories about Johnny because he was just. I lost my father in 1988, and Johnny became the man who I wanted to please more than anybody.
Your surrogate father.
When Johnny said something, I did something special. That was, I get chills talking about it now. There was nothing beyond that. Didn't matter. I remember pitching a game one time in 92. I gave up 3 runs in the top of the first of the Cardinals. I came in, and this is my first year starting the big leagues. And I said, they will not score another run.
I think that's a big part of this too. You haven't mentioned too, is that's when you started
Yeah,
starting
yeah,
primarily, correct?
right,
And
right.
how long were you with Mr. Padres for? Like how long was he with the Phillies?
92 to 95, 96. Can't
So
remember what year he
so that
passed.
first 20 minutes obviously had a huge impact on you. But
Enormous.
what about him and Coach Farrell do you think separated them from other guys you got
Their
to work
ability to
with?
communicate. They understood. Every one
You
of
think
them
it's
understood.
that simple? Just
It's
that?
that simple. Every one of them. And by the way, for all, and this is probably relevant to now, to all these coaches in the big leagues now. I don't have anything against coaches in the big leagues who never played. That a lot of that had nothing to do with me. But you can't teach me what it's like to get a big out in the eighth inning of Game 7 of the World Series unless you've been there. You can talk about it
Or on the other side of the coin, like
either
you're
way.
talking about giving up three
Either
runs
way.
yeah.
And Johnny had been there.
It's hard to hear that advice from someone who hasn't walked that path.
Right, right. Well, you can give me all the advice you want, but it rings hollow in my head because you've never done it. So how would you know? And that's not, again, with all the drive line and all these schools that are teaching these teachers to coach and big league guys getting jobs without ever having the guys that have never been to the big leagues that coach. I'm not saying they can't. They can be great coaches too, but they can never understand the pressure of playing in the big leagues. Never. Don't care how good they were if they weren't playing because it's different.
It's just different.
It's just different. And that's not a derogatory
And I
slant.
mean, I can say that from just my close proximity to it from you. Like I obviously never experienced 1/10 of the anxiety and stress or whatever it is for whatever guy at any given moment. So like
Right.
being close enough to you to get some of that runoff is you can't like you're saying you cannot put it into words. You cannot understand it unless you've
And,
experienced it.
and again, it's not a knock on guys that haven't coached. Buck Showalter never played in the big leagues. Buck Showalter was one of the best managers I ever played for. And I, a man to this day, I dearly love. And, he was the first guy after we won the World Series. I called him from the field. Like, he never played a day in the big leagues, but he was the most prepared manager I've ever played for. And, I think some guys wear it in a negative way. Like, I've never played in the big leagues. So they feel like they have to be something
Well,
else.
there's that, and then there's what coming from New England. I'm spoiled. Coach Belichick, like
Right.
he wasn't a football player. He was a football junkie, and that's the other route into.
Yep.
Like there's Theo. Like Theo
Right.
wasn't an athlete. He
Well,
was a.
Theo really, when you look at, and he's a
It's
great
it's not
example.
coaching, but you know what
Right.
I'm
No,
saying.
but Theo was that Ivy League sabermetrics guy who it's funny because I saw it early with him and with others. They didn't like the fact that there was an intangible they couldn't quantify, right? If you look at what happened in Boston when he retraded back for Doug Mirabelli, and when you look at the player he got in Chicago that took them over the hump, it wasn't a statistical guy. It was David Ross. It was a guy because that clubhouse atmosphere, that clubhouse thing is real. And you need somebody in there when you're not there. Because Theo realized very early on, this is our space. The GM, you can go down the clubhouse, but don't hang.
Yeah,
Unless you're a former player and you're talking baseball. That's our
it's
place.
a different thing.
Right.
Like you're talking
And
about with
and Theo
these
understood
guys.
that. And so he didn't hang. He'd come down and talk and whatnot, but he realized he needed somebody down in that clubhouse shepherding the club in a certain way. And in Boston, Dougie was one of those guys.
Yeah,
It wasn't the guy leading the team in average home runs and RBIs. It was almost never that
a
guy.
veteran presence
In Baltimore,
gets it.
Cal Ripken was the leader, but Cal Ripken didn't have meetings.
Yeah.
Cal Ripken basically said the same thing. Scott, we'll talk about some future episode. That's the reason Scott Rowland left Philly. They wanted him to be that guy. That's not who he was. Scott Rowland and Cal Ripken wanted you to show up, play as hard as they played, and then go home.
Yep.
And that was their lead by example kind of thing. So, um, no, that was fun. That was fun. So we'll be back on Sunday.
Yep.
We'll give you guys a rundown of the week on Sunday. If you guys have questions, you can find me on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter by popular demand. But we'll be back on Sunday to give you guys a rehash of the week and then look ahead to next week and see what's going on. And we'll give some fantasy insight. Hope you guys are enjoying the show. Just bear with us as we continue to grow. You'll start to see timestamps on the YouTube videos where you can go to find things that are in different topics.
Some of the stuff we talked about today will be
Right.
linked in highlights. You'll be able to find it easy.
So Garrick and I will, and eventually we'll get somebody where we have two cameras. And actually, let me show you, Garrick. Let me see if I can get this video. Oh, nope, don't want to do that. Here we go. There's Garrick. So Garrick is literally sitting right next to me, but I don't have a way without like it looking weird to switch cameras. We'll get there.
Work in progress.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But if there's any recommendations for the show, please let me know. Let us know, and we'll catch you guys on Sunday. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, and He has risen. Take care.